KMSU.
Hey, it's David Ellefson calling in for the interview.
David, hello. This is Dustin Wilmus. How you doing?
Hey, Dustin, what's happening, man?
Not a whole lot. We're just interested in asking you a few questions, if that's all right.
Perfect. Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. I am here with my co-host, Tom.
Hey there, how you doing?
Hey, Tom, what's happening?
I am good. Glad to get you on the line.
Thank you.
Well, I guess we'll start with the kind of the typical question. What got you, into becoming a bassist and pursuing a career in music?
Well, as you may know, I grew up not too far from where you are down in Jackson, Minnesota, on a farm down there, and not exactly a rock and roll community, and definitely not a haven for bass players to hail from. So really, I was riding the school bus to school every morning, me and my older brother, about an hour school bus ride from the farm into town, into Jackson. And when I was a kid, and I'm talking like when I was like 10 years old, 10, 11 years old, the bus driver started turning on WLSAM out of Chicago. And at that time, they were playing, hard rock, things like Sweet, Styx, Kiss, BTO, various things that were popular back in that day. And that was like the first time that I heard like heavy distorted guitars, and I heard bass parts and men singing, because a lot of the stuff I grew up hearing around my house was like Motown stuff with like women singers, So this like heavy hard rock stuff really rocked my world, and that piqued my interest right there. And then I started learning about electric guitars and a bass guitar. And for whatever reason, a bass guitar called to me. I have no idea why. But I bought a bass guitar from out of the newspaper over in Fairmont, Minnesota, a little Gibson bass. Bought a bass amp from a music store over in Worthington, Minnesota. And I sat in my basement every day after school with my books and learned how to play the bass, and eventually got with a couple of guys a few months later, formed a band, and then we started going out trying to find places to play. And fast forward, 37 years now, here I am doing this, and 30 years of it being in Megadeth, and or 30 years of Megadeth. So it's, I don't know. It's funny how life takes its turns, but I tell you, music, probably like for you guys too, you work in radio, music is what gets me out of bed in the morning. And fortunately, it's still the motivator for my life today.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about, Megadeth and you meeting Dave Mustaine? How did that come about?
Well, so I knew by the time I was 16, I remember clearly this one day I was rehearsing with my band in my father's farm shed on the farm, and Van Halen was really taking off out of L.A. There just seemed to be this buzz of stuff coming out of L.A., and it just hit me square in the gut. Man, you got to get to L.A. And that powerful thought was just superseded everything in my life. I mean, I was ready to dye my hair blonde, change my name, and just move and be a rock star. It was game on. And of course, my parents were adamant I finish high school, which was a good thing. But from that day, everything I planned in my life was about when I graduate high school at Jackson High School, the day after I leave, I am moving to California. And that's really how it happened. And fortunately, by the time I got there in 1983, I moved literally 5 days after I graduated high school. Everything in L.A., it was full on going on for heavy metal. The town was booming. There were radio stations playing everything from Zeppelin to Fastway to Van Halen to Iron Maiden to Ronnie Dio. There were metal shows playing, all of it except Motorhead, Venom, So it was just such a great time to move there. And again, it was just this inspiration I had more than anything. So when I got there, I literally was there not even a week, and I meet Dave Mustaine. He happened to live in an apartment right up above me. We start playing together, which in June of 1983 was the formation of Megadeth. And, here we are all these years later. So it's something about that gut instinct at age 16 on the farm in Jackson, Minnesota was somehow divinely inspired to lead me to where I was meant to be.
Well, yeah, can you tell us a bit about, the early days of Megadeth? It's been kind of well documented that Mustaine was kicked out of Metallica and kind of formed the band as maybe revenge or something. How did that sort of thing sit with you?
Well, it was for sure. It's funny. I have this new book that just came out this last week called My Life with Death, and it's my autobiography. Dave wrote one about 3 years ago, so now mine just came out. And a lot of our stories are very, they kind of cross-collateralize with each other in a very cool way, which tell the Megadeth story. So a lot of this stuff is in the book. Certainly, Dave was mad for sure. He just got fired out of Metallica, which would obviously become, one of the biggest bands in the world. So he was not very happy, but yeah, certainly a part of Megadeth was, like, I'm going to do it right this time, which I guess was revengeful on one way toward Metallica, but I think if anything, it was more of a, I see where I blew it, and this time I'm going to do it right. And I think that's part of why Dave is so driven. I think it's why he's so hands-on with everything in Megadeth, and I get it. That's how I was with my bands back in Minnesota when I was getting started. I was the guy who had my hands on every part of it. I wanted to know what was going on in all aspects of it. So, lots of times, I think the anger fueled the music and maybe the drive for it. But, pretty quickly by our second record, Peace Sells, Produce Buying, I think we had defined our own sound. We did not sound like Metallica. Clearly, Megadeth was a new band. It was a new sound. All within the same genre, but we were clearly making our own contributions.
Now, over the years, you guys have had a lot of different kind of lineup changes and guys coming and going. Has that been difficult for you to, I guess, establish relationships with new guys and keep the momentum moving?
Yeah, no, for sure. It was. And there's times when you go, man, this just ain't working. This has got to change. And then there's times when you go, this is working. It's just there's some issues we got to deal with. And I was always that guy, I think, over the years to kind of, be the calm voice of reason to sort of make those things work, But at some point, people either want to be here or they don't. And that's usually indicated by their behavior and how they think, how they play, how they act. And, music and being in a rock band is not for everybody. There's some fantastic musicians, but they don't work well in a band. So, and Megadeth it's a tough band to be in sometimes. It's, not just musically is it very demanding, but as a lifestyle it's demanding. So it's something that a lot of people got, eaten up and spit out and didn't survive it.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like over the years, as you mentioned, 30 years in Megadeth, there's been a lot of bands that have come and they've, gotten success rather quickly and then kind of died by the wayside, so to speak, and you guys seem to keep on going.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's come to me, the two hardest parts about a rock band are, number one, forming it, and number two, continuing it. It's, Dave and I to have this sort of random, by chance meeting that apparently was meant to be, for us to start Megadeth, and is great. But, the continuation of it for 30 years has not been easy, It's at one point Dave walked away from it, and that then led to my non-involvement with it for a few years. So, even us, the two, founding members of it, have had time away from it. So, it's a weird, rock bands can be a weird thing. And plus, obviously, there's the music that keeps everybody involved in it. But, there's a lot more to it than people would probably think.
Now, you mentioned, obviously, you left for a few years and then eventually came back. When you had that break, did that kind of allow you to recharge? Or?
Yeah, for sure, it did. And it wasn't intentional. In 2002, I don't think any of us were thinking Megadeth was going to end, probably including Dave, but that's the way it went. And, that did, on one hand, it sort of unleashed me to go pursue some other things, which were, quite honestly, really helped me come back into the band a few years later, a much stronger player, much better songwriter, certainly a more mature person. And those things turned out to be a blessing in hindsight. So it's sometimes things which seem weird at the time often, can be used to your advantage. And that was definitely one that I think actually bode well for everybody.
Now, obviously, for being a band for so long, you've had so many different kind of facets of your career and different sounds. And a lot of people have their favorite albums. Would you say you have a favorite or one that you're most proud of?
The Countdown to Extinction record still ranks at the top for me. I know a lot of the fans like Rust in Peace, which was its predecessor. And I get it. It's a great thrash record. I think Countdown, what I liked about it is it still had the thrash elements, but it also allowed us to move a little broader and do a few other things. There was a lot of melodic components developing in Megadeth at that time. And also to just explore writing songs, just kind of take that a step further. We just did a Countdown to Extinction tour, 20th anniversary last year. We documented it with a live DVD and CD that just came out last month. And so you can hear it. Those songs really, they stand up. I mean, they're as mainstream songs, as thrash metal songs, they really do stand the test of time.
It's pretty well, I guess, documented also that you and Mustaine are both, you're real open about your Christian faith. Is that, I guess, do you experience any kind of backlash or anything strange from people, regarding the music that you play, or how much influence does that have?
We're all from the Midwest. I assume you guys are from there or grew up around there. And I mean, everybody in the United States, pretty much Western culture for the most part, is of a Judeo-Christian background. And so it's always funny when people freak out about that because, most people I know, most of our fans grew up in some sort of a religious upbringing. I think where it kind of becomes a sticking point with the fans is the fans often look for rock and roll as, we don't have to work day jobs. We don't have to have a God. We don't have to, eat breakfast or take a shower or put our pants on. And we're like somehow these, immortal demigods, you know what I mean? And, we worship you as a god. How come you have a god too? That's not fair, And I think sometimes what it does more than anything is it makes the listener, the fan, sometimes go, well, wait a minute, if they have to go to church, then that means I have to go to church. I don't want to go to church, And so I think it's more than anything, it just sort of agitates this rebellious nature of if I thought being a rock star was the ultimate screw you, I don't ever have to answer to anybody. And I think that when they find out, their favorite rock stars, maybe say a prayer before they go to bed at night, it sort of just smashes their whole image of us,
So it's almost kind of like metal, but in a reverse sort of way.
Well, so much of metal, and I speak for it because I am this guy. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, got in, Black Sabbath. When Ronnie Dio came out, he wrote these very kind of mystical lyrics. When I moved to L.A. in 1983, all over, people were writing songs about Satan. And they weren't necessarily satanic songs. We were writing songs about things that scared us, It's like, looking into the abyss and the dark side and the occult and what is that? We're fascinated. And I think probably those of us who had religious upbringing, I mean, I'm a Minnesota Lutheran kid, so, us in the Midwest, our religion is either probably Catholicism or Protestant, upbringing, which is, it's pretty middle of the road, there's nothing too wacky about it. And for me, getting into the arts and music and songwriting and things, you start kind of, you explore. You go, what else is out there? And you move to L.A. I remember as a kid growing up in Minnesota, they'd always talk about the Moonies, these cults that were out in L.A., in California, the cults where you'd shave your head and walk around with a robe all day or something, and people were like, don't get involved in those cults out there, and so when you start writing songs about, the occult and, these things, all of a sudden, it scares people. It's like it freaks them out because it's, not something you sang about on the farm in Minnesota, and a lot of people around the world, it really rockets them out of their comfort zone. And part of it, that's the fun. I mean, Jeff Hanneman, the late Jeff Hanneman from Slayer, I think, lots of times he'd write these just really dark songs about dark themes, but Jeff was actually kind of a happy, like, he'd always laugh a lot, so in my mind is Jeff's probably sitting there going, let's write a song about rain and blood, ha ha ha, won't that be funny, that'll scare people, and like the Slayer guys, it's like they're all, had good families, they grew up with that. So it's kind of funny that now they're just notoriously dark, supposedly scary satanic band, and it's, I just think, for us in our age group and, excuse me, in our genre, we just wrote about things that scared us, and it turns out it scared you too.
So talking about Minnesota, you've got a show coming up in St. Paul, November 23rd. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
You're excited to come back to the home state?
Sure, of course. I'm always excited to come back. Again, especially because I have this book out now, because the whole first few chapters of that book are about right there in where you are in Minnesota, Jackson, Fairmont, Minneapolis, that's where my life was. It's where I grew up. It's where I discovered rock and roll. I formed my first bands there. We played around the area, in Minnesota, Iowa, South Dakota a little bit, so it's like, that's my hood, and so to come back and play there is great. I'm glad my story is now documented and published and put out there because it's just, I hope it even further connects all of us in the Megadeth tribe, our fans, all of us as a metal tribe. I hope it connects us even more to Minnesota.
Yeah, again, the book's called My Life and Death. Is that right?
Yeah, My Life with Death. Yeah,
with Death. And where can people get it?
You can get it anywhere. It's released at all the major bookstores. If you want to order it online, of course, it's on Amazon and all those places. But there's also a web link, www.mylifewithdeathbook.com. And by the way, Death is D-E-T-H, like Megadeth.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to you coming to town. It's I've told many people you guys are probably the best metal show I've ever seen. You guys are awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, and this year, we look to update the set list with some different songs, and it's kind of cool. This year's 25th anniversary of the So Far So Good So What record. So we're starting to kind of pull a few songs off that record, put those into the live show. It seems fans are stoked about that. So so it's, every time we come through, we try to bring something different, upgrade the show.
Yeah, and isn't it 20 years next year for Euthanasia? Is that right?
It is.
So
yeah,
maybe
it is.
we'll see
In
something.
fact, I'm kind of me and Sean Drover are like the keeper of the facts with these things. So one day Dave said, he looked at me and he said, he goes, man, would you sit down and write down all the years all the records came out and kind of put together this timeline, which I was happy to do because to me it's fun to go pick songs off these records. More and more. We put out new records, we write new songs, which is cool that we're still a band who can still write new songs. A lot of bands get to this point in their career and quite honestly, they're creatively kind of tapped out. They just don't create much anymore. And it's cool that we do. But at the same time, our legacy, is what it is. And that part keeps growing. The stuff from the early days. And if you're a longtime fan, or even if you're a teenager in your early 20s and you're just starting to get into Megadeth, chances are you're probably tapping back into a lot of those earlier records. So for me and Dave, especially the two of us who have stood on that stage and played Megadeth songs now for many, many years, it's fun to dip deeper into some of these older records and pull out tunes that he and I haven't played for years. The fans, some of them have never heard played before, other than just hearing them on the record. They've never heard the band perform them live. So it's kind of a fun phase of our career right now to be able to go back into these older records and bust those out for the live show.
Yeah, I definitely think it says something to your credit to be able to play this style of music and do it well still after all these years.
Yeah, there's definitely a stamina that's required to do it. But we take care of ourselves. We try to be in good shape and keep our chops up, and we value our music. We value our fans. If without them, we wouldn't be able to do a tour. So we lots of times we'll run it out there on Megadeth.com and stuff. We'll say, hey, what are some songs you guys are wanting to hear? And so we pay attention. I mean, we can't do everything for everybody. At some point, we have to make the final decision. But it seems like these albums hitting these 20 and 25 year celebration marks. That's kind of a cool path right now to be able to go back and revisit those records.
Definitely. Well, we are excited for the new book and to see you coming to St. Paul. Is there anything else you want to leave us with?
You know what? That's it. There may be some appearances in your area announced. I know Chris Broderick and I think, are going to be doing a signing up in St. Paul the day before the show at Capitol Guitars. So anybody who may be up in the area the day before, there's some information will probably be published on that on probably on Megadeth.com, as well as over on Jackson Guitars site, and as well as DavidEllefson.com. So some of that stuff, and might even be possibly a book signing appearance in the area as well. So I know it's only a couple weeks out, but a lot of pretty cool stuff ramping up right now. So might be some cool ways to meet a couple of us and do a little hang and get a little FaceTime together too.
Beautiful.
All right. Again, David, we are huge fans. Thanks a lot for being on with us.
Yep. Thanks so much, you guys. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.